Hey parents, let's talk about a sensitive topic, which is bedwetting, or what's known as enuresis. This is a sensitive issue because it wraps up a lot of complex things for kids. This is happening usually anywhere between 4 and 9 years old. And this is something that maybe early on isn't a big deal socially, emotionally, but as we get to those older ages, it starts to affect a kid's confidence or willingness to go into different social settings. Maybe it's an overnight summer camp or spending the night with a friend's house when they get old enough for that. This is something that is going to limit what they feel comfortable doing. And for a lot of kids, it adds this layer of like shame or this feeling of guilt almost. So we want to talk about how can we address this? What can we do to help kids out when they're dealing with this? And I'm willing to bet if you're like most parents that you're listening to this, you've got a kid that's struggling, you've probably tried a lot of stuff. Maybe you've limited fluids, you try to deal with some extra bathroom breaks, or you're even waking them up in the middle of the night proactively, try to get them to go. You've tried to make diet changes. One that's really helpful is sugar, right? If we get rid of sugar, that can be a super big deal, especially fluids that are sugar, because then that's a double whammy, stuff like the juices. There's different special bedwetting alarms, right? There's moisture sensors that can help you trigger that. There's a lot of different things we can do. Positive reinforcement is even a good one by itself. And that's one that, to kind of go on a little side trail, I'd really encourage the positive side of that reinforcement. I know you can get frustrated as a parent because if your kid's waking up in the middle of the night because we're having bedwetting issues, you're waking up too. And that wears on you, and you don't have an unlimited supply of patience. But this is something that if we get too worked up, if we get too upset, if we start to get mad, and we're like, why do you keep having this issue? What's going on? Why don't you just wake up? That is not going to help. This is not a scenario we want to beat it into them, right? Because that will never work. In fact, it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to push them more into a stressed out state, which means their body's going to be more disconnected, and you're going to have even more struggle. So I know it's hard, but try to pull deep from your patience and your well of reserves that you have on your own to not be putting that extra pressure and stress into them. So what can we do? If you followed Thrive for any amount of time, yes, those are all good things, those different extra supports, but you know what our perspective is. It's always address the cause, address the why. So let's talk about this. When we really boil it down, the cause of why a kid is struggling with this is it's a brain-body disconnection. Our feedback loops between our brain and our bladder are not connecting well. Because when we're conscious, when we're awake, and we have that urge or that sensation of a full bladder, that sends messages to your brain, which then allows you to make the choice of, oh, I need to find a restroom. That is supposed to work at nighttime too, but when there's a little bit of these disconnections or your body's a little bit in too much of a stressed out state, we have harder times getting those signals through. There's a few key areas we expect to see those stressors show up when we're doing these scans and we're looking at kids who are struggling with this. Primary one is this middle to upper lumbar spine. That's where we see a lot of the nerves going to bowel and bladder regulation and control. So that's an area where if we are disturbed or dysfunctional, those feedback loops, those sensors going both ways are going to be thrown off. Similar area, this middle to lower thoracic zone, that's some of the kidneys, urinary tract, bladder that's involved in those areas too. So that lower thoracic, upper lumbar zones are the primary ways that we see those stresses show up. That is ones that we've seen have really, really good effects with our kids, whether it's early on, they're coming in for the first time, or they've been under care for a long time, and it's a struggle that pops up here and there. You know, parents mention it, and we're like, oh, I bet you we know what we're gonna find. I can think of several kids. That L2 finding is exactly what it is that gets them back on track. The other thing that can be going on, though, is just a big picture stress regulation, right? If their whole system is in a stressed out state, they're going to be on edge, and their body doesn't really care about these non-survival modes and these non-survival functions as much because it just thinks it's dealing with some life-threatening situation. And that a lot of times shows up with this vagus nerve in the top of the neck. So like always, we want to get to the bottom of it. We want to measure that cause and figure out what is going on so we can actually address the real issue at play. I hope that helps. Like I said, I really want to encourage and reinforce, let's take positive approaches with these. Getting frustrated, yelling, getting worked up at our kids with this is never going to help, and it's usually going to go in the opposite direction. So if you want more help addressing the cause, addressing the why, bring it up next time you're in if you're one of our current Thrive families, or if you're looking for help, reach out. We'd love to chat, get your kids set up for those scans and see what we can do. Have a great rest of your day, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.